The climate crisis is not gender neutral and it can't be solved without the empowerment of women, says the United Nations. In the developing world, women generally have smaller carbon footprints than men, but tend to be affected more by climate change. Agriculture is the most important source of jobs for these women, but the rising number of droughts and floods mean they have to work harder to earn a living. Daughters are forced to leave school to help their mothers bear the increased burden. Women are often in charge of gathering water for their families, giving them a unique insight into the changing environment. The UN says it's time to invest in women's leadership to make them the agents of change rather than the victims. A recent study found that increasing the number of female lawmakers in national parliaments led to greater adoption of more stringent climate change policies. Now, since COP began in 1995, there have been only 5 female COP presidents. Last year, fewer than 36% of delegates and only 20% of those heading delegations were women. I spoke to Sanda Ojiambo, Assistant Secretary-General at the United Nations Global Compact.
It is absolutely important to include women, marginalized and young people in this conversation. You know, climate is not just, we're not here just discussing climate. Climate is really what I call a threat multiplier. A climate crisis impacts on health, it impacts on education, it impacts on economic empowerment, it impacts on the way that women and young people spend their lives and their livelihoods in terms of trying to respond to the climate crisis. So it's absolutely important to have their voices at the table, to learn from their lived experiences and to be able to design solutions that really will make a difference for them.
And yet, when you look at the family photo for COP28, it's mainly rows of men. Why are there so few women at the negotiating tables at COP28?
Well, look, it starts, higher than that. I think, for COP27, the statistics was, 7 out of 110 leaders who were present were female. I don't know what the statistics are now, but it's, the political system isn't representative of the gender breakdown that we have to begin with. But what is most important is the extent to which countries, delegations, negotiators understand the gender dynamic of the climate crisis that we face, and that is what is most important. So, as you said, solutions need to be inclusive. They need to take into consideration that, 4 out of 5 people who get displaced by a climate crisis are women or young people, and we need to be sure that we can address what that means for them. It means that when there's a climate crisis or households need to respond to displacement, it's often women who are at the forefront taking time off to provide solutions for resiliency. And that really just means that there's less chance of them, earning an income, doing other economically empowering activities. And I think it's just very important to have that in mind.
So where is the impetus for change coming from? Is it small-scale solutions? Is it big-scale solutions? Give us some examples of what's happening where that's really driving the sustainability conversation.
I think the impetus has to be both top-down as well as bottom-up. We need a macro change in the way that we're looking at the climate crisis. We need to look at the climate crisis in tandem with the opportunities for building on renewables. And then we need to see what those look like, not just for nation states and economies, but at the household level, because it's at the household level where that systemic challenge for women and girls often starts. So if we're able to address some of the big policy issues, make sure that incentives go to the right place, shifting from fossil fuels into renewables, making sure that private sector responds appropriately, designing solutions that go from macro grids down to mini grids to households, changing the fortunes around energy and energy access, but also looking at building resilience in communities and in households and in countries and economies as a whole, we'll be able to make those changes. So, we need a great enabling policy framework for business to be able to operate and drive solutions. And then we need businesses to work hand in hand with governments and leaders to be able to drive real solutions for women and girls at the household level. COP by nature is a negotiated process. From what I understand, there's a lot, I think we're maybe getting close to about 100,000 delegates and attendees. We do have to talk and negotiate through the processes. I think what is really important is do we have enough inclusive input into what goes into the negotiations and enough different perspectives and voices working collaboratively towards it.